everybody, this is Ryan McClanahan with HistoryThroughCards.com. I hope you're all doing very well today. So in this video, I'm going to tell you guys about my three favorite Jewish baseball players, and two of them you're definitely going to know who they are. The other one is rather obscure, but it is Andy Cohen of the New York Giants, and he played from 1926 to 1928, and he had a 281 batting average, 14 home runs, and 114 RBI during his time with the Giants. But he's got a really fascinating case that I wanted to tell you about. Andy Cohen also has three cards that I'm aware of, and one of them in particular is in the 1933 Gaudi set, and it's a low number card. And low number Gaudis are notorious for really kind of having a softer stock. And this one in particular, and I think two other cards, uh, really kind of they're on a lot of want lists, and including this card, just because of the stock issues. And there is a premium on Andy Cohen's card, and I'm going to explain why that is in a minute. But he also has two cards in the 1933 Warch tobacco set or Warch cigar set, and I've actually never seen them, but I have seen them online, and they're kind of neat looking. So let me get into the article right now, and I'll come back and I'll tell you a little bit more about Andy Cohen. This is from the Latimer County News Democrat, Wilburton, Oklahoma, April 16th, 1926. Andy Cohen, Waco ball player to N. Hunt, Jewish ball player. For many years, John J. McGraw, astute manager of the New York Giants, has lamented the fact that he has been unable to find a good Jewish ball player. McGraw maintained that such a player would be a $1 million attraction in the city, and has had his scouts combing the bushes from Portland to Palestine. Now, the St. Louis Cardinals believe they have a line in on one Andy Cohen, who plays shortstop for the Waco club of the Texas League. The Cards played Waco recently on their exhibition tour, and Cohen was the star of the game, his work overshadowing that of famed Rogers Hornsby and other St. Louis luminaries. On the second time at bat, Andy took hold of a fastball and drove it out of sight in the general direction of the panhandle for a real home run. When Cohen came to bat again, the Cardinals pitcher was wary, but this little Jewish player belted out a single and followed this a few minutes later with a two-bagger. Andy also stole a base. Just the boy from McGraw, agreed the Cardinals. John McGraw was really onto something when he signed Cohen to a $20,000 contract to play for the Giants. The New York had or still does have, a very large Jewish community, but the problem is that McGraw had found out was there weren't a lot of Jewish ball players, so adding a Jewish ball player would bring the fans to to the polo grounds to see one of their own play, and at the same time would bring a lot of revenue into the ball club. Very smart idea. Um, this actually also occurred with the Cincinnati Reds a few decades prior, around 1910 or so, when Frank Bancroft went down to Cuba to pick up Cuban ball players to add to the Cincinnati Reds. And we know two of these ball players, Armando Marsans and Rafael Almeida, and both of those guys are featured in the 1912 T207 set. Now, what's interesting about that is that there were a few other ball clubs, specifically the Giants and the Washington Senators, that had a lot of Cuban ball players on their clubs in the 1930s and 1940s, and they brought in a lot of revenue. Almeida and Marsans were responsible for a lot of revenue for the Reds and the other New York ball clubs when they went to New York, because again, there was a large Spanish population as well, and they deliberately went out to see Marsans and Almeida play. Marsans actually ends up on the Yankees in 1917, specifically to draw in crowds, which he did really well, in fact. So that is one of the reasons why uh, McGraw wanted Andy Cohen on his ball club. And when Cohen was playing for the Giants, he was very popular. He had a nickname, the Tuscaloosa Terror, and he actually ends up going down to the minor leagues in 1929, I believe. Actually, I think he was there twice. During that year, he actually set a International League record with 59 consecutive errorless games, but he broke his leg instead, and that kind of ended his career. What I thought was really interesting about this article as well is that it mentions Rogers Hornsby being traded to the Boston Braves to make room for Andy Cohen here. And, wherever Hornsby went, he always wore out his welcome. Hornsby ends up on the Braves and he immediately starts a feud with Emil Fuchs, the owner of the Braves. Fuchs turns around and tells the press that he is a member of the Klan. Now, I looked into this in my look in the 1933 Gaudy set, and I couldn't find anything before, during, or after Hornsby's career to suggest that he was a member of the Klan, and same with Tris Speaker as well. Hornsby would have had the right to sue Fuchs in court over this if he wanted to, because it really could have hampered Hornsby's career. Hornsby was a real pain in the neck wherever you went. Great ball player, great batting eye, and he was a degenerate gambler as well. And he definitely had his fair share of issues during his lifetime and during his career, but at no point in time was he ever a member of the Klan, and that's something that kind of dogs him even to this day. And same with Tris Speaker as well, and to a lesser extent, Ty Cobb. All three of these guys had their major issues, but there's no evidence to suggest that they were ever members of the hooded variety, and so that I thought was really fascinating. Anyway, getting back to Andy Cohen here, Andy Cohen actually he's in the minor leagues twice at this time. I can't really tell for which reason. I think the first time maybe to brush up on his skills. I think he has a few injuries as well. McGraw had asked him to actually stay with the team, but because he was seeing a reduced playing time, he chose instead. McGraw had said you can choose to stay with the team, but you're not going to see a whole lot of time, or you can go down to the minor leagues, and that's what he did. He chose to go down to the minors and play with the Buffalo Bisons of the International League, and he was really loved by the fans in Buffalo, and they held an Andy Cohen Day, which I think is really cool, and they gave him a lot of gifts and stuff, and really fantastic. But he did have a 16-year career in the minor leagues, and he had a pretty good batting average as well. I think it was 288 lifetime. However, this was about the same time that Pearl Harbor happened, so he ended up going into the Army Combat Engineers, and he was a first sergeant, and he saw action in North Africa and Italy, and he ends up in 1946 as a manager in the minor leagues, and I believe he was also very briefly a manager in the Philadelphia Phillies for maybe a few games. But that's really kind of very interesting about Andy Cohen here. And he's not the only Jewish star. In fact, I am going to talk to you about my next guy, who is really kind of a hero to me. In fact, I have to say that Hank Greenberg is probably one of the most important ball players in my collection. And it's not just about the things that he did on the field or for his country, which I'm going to talk about in a little bit. It's that he showed true character and what it is to be human. And this is really something that you can't fake. Um, Other people will pick up on it. It's your actions that really speak for you much louder than your words. And I really had to add Hank Greenberg to my collection pretty early on, in fact. These cards weren't really that expensive when I first started collecting vintage either. Now they're kind of really getting into stratospheric circumstances, if you will. But the first Greenberg that I did pick up in my collection was this, and it's a 1934-36 Diamond Stars, and it happens to be one of my favorite cards in my collection. The design is awesome, and this one actually is the corrected version. There's two. There's the uncorrected and the corrected, and I believe it's in the name right here. But Diamond Stars are one of my favorite sets, and I'll show you the back of it too. This one actually cost me quite a bit of money too. I think I paid 115 for it when I was a teenager, and that was a lot of money. But today, as I say, Greenberg's cards are just really getting really kind of out of control, if you will. But it's really kind of only because everybody wants a card of his for good reason. It also makes it more difficult for collectors coming in to try to add to their collections one of his cards. The other Greenberg card that I got was at auction, and I had to fight for this card because it was between me and this older gentleman who wanted it. And it is this right here. And as you can see, there's a little bit of paper loss on this card right here, and it's probably in poor condition or fair condition. There are no creases in this card. It's just a little bit of paper loss and a little bit of rounded corners. However, this is really kind of a difficult card too, and it cost me about $75 at auction, which I was not happy with. But looking back on it, I think that may have been an okay deal, even in poor condition um, or fair condition. This card is considered his rookie, as is the Diamond Stars here. The thing is that he has four rookie cards, in fact. Even though he started playing in 1930, he only had one game in 1930. The other rookie cards that he has, a 1934 Batter Up, which is actually a really nice card. I like that set as well. I like the photography in it and the player selection for sure. He also has a 1934 Annis Furs, and I've only owned one Annis Furs card in my collection, and I didn't realize how large these cards are. I thought they were kind of like maybe the size of like 1952 tops, but they're much larger, and it made storage quite difficult. Actually, I sold that card. The Annis Furs company obviously is a fur company based in Detroit, and they issued a team set from 1934 of the Detroit Tigers, and the 1934 Tigers went on to win the World Series. Annis furs are not really found. I've seen maybe a handful of them during my career, if you will, in the hobby. I've never actually seen Hank Greenberg's Annis furs card, though I suspect it is very difficult, very expensive, and again, I'm not entirely sure how PSA or any other grading company handles these cards because they were cut from a sheet, and so I would suspect that they would be authentic, although there actually are a size to them. But some cards I think are different, proportionately different than others. So again, this is something that you might want to keep in the back of your mind when you're looking to add an Annis Furs card to your collection. They're black and white. They're very nice. The Charlie Garinger in that set's quite nice as well. I'm a big fan of Charlie Garinger's. So those are his rookie cards. I think that you may be able to afford one of his cards. I'm never going to tell you guys that something is impossible to reach or your goals. I'm never going to do that. Um, you may fail, but you're not really failing if you don't try. Hank Greenberg made his debut on September 14th, 1930 versus the New York Yankees. He only played that one game and then he was sent down to the minors. He then came up with the Detroit Tigers on April 22nd, 1933 versus the Browns, and that's when the team won 5-1. He really missed a lot of time during his career. He only played 13 years, but he probably would have had a 17-year career had he not missed the first 2 years of his career. And he also missed another year in 1936 when he ended up breaking his wrist, and that was during a collision with Jake Powell. And Jake Powell has a very sordid past as a ball player and as a person. In 1934, the Tigers went to the World Series for the first time since 1909, which just surprised me. Um, this is really impressive considering that their manager at the time, Bucky Harris, split town and it left the owner, Frank Navin, looking for a new manager. Now, at one point in time, he was considering Babe Ruth, but that deal fell through. So he went back and he asked Mickey Cochran if he would be the player manager. It was Cochran who took the Tigers to the World Series in 1934 and 1935. In 1934, though, Hank Greenberg was really coming into his own, and this time he was a established star. During the run up to the World Series, the pennant, he had decided not to play during Rosh Hashanah, and this caused quite a commotion in the sports press and with the fans as well. And he decided, after talking to a few rabbis, if that was the appropriate thing to do. And he ultimately decided that he would play on Rosh Hashanah, but not on Yom Kippur. This decision really was not the most popular thing in the world, and it wasn't popular with fans. He made his decision, uh, and it must have been a very difficult decision as well. I would always say never to compromise your ideals, never to compromise with your faith. That is something that you will have to deal with on your own, whether or not you've done the right thing. I'm not sure how he felt about it afterwards. Again, he did win the World Series, and he won the World Series again in 1935. And in 1935, he had a great season. He ended up having 200 plus hit seasons in 1934, 35, and 1937, but he never led the league in hits. The American League in the 1930s was absolutely stacked with great hitting. You had Charlie Gehringer, Jimmy Fox, Babe Ruth. Later on, you had Joe DiMaggio and you had Lou Gehrig as well. And I think for the most part, why Hank Greenberg actually never led the league in hits was because of Lou Gehrig. And so it was really a very fierce league for hitting. In 1940, the government instituted one of the first military drafts since World War I, and a lot of ball players were drafted in 1940 and 1941, and a lot of them actually ended up being deferred until after the season. I can think of one ball player who actually missed the entire 1941 season, or most of it, and that was pitcher Hugh McCauley of the Philadelphia Phillies. I think he lost about 5 seasons altogether. His nickname was Losing Pitcher, so the military probably gave him a great out for not losing more games. In any event, I know of two other ball players who were deferred until after the season to report to their draft boards. And one of them was Cecil Travis. The other was Buddy Lewis of the Washington Senators. And I think a lot of ball clubs kind of helped their ball players out on this. In the case of Hank Greenberg, though, he actually spent almost the entire 1941 season, with the exception of 19 games, in the military. He was with the Armored Division, and then Pearl Harbor happens, and he went to reenlist again, and he ends up in the Army Air Corps as a captain over in the CBI theater. And he's got some really interesting stories about that. So during his time in the military, he probably would have tacked on another 175 to 200 home runs, which conservatively would have put him at 506 to 530 home runs altogether. During his career, he only had 331 home runs. But, again, we don't really know what or how many home runs he missed. This is a guess based on the averages that he had from like 1933 through 1941 or 1940. He got back and he went to the Pirates, and he was really very instrumental in helping Ralph Kiner. And Ralph Kiner really credited him for hitting home runs and kind of taking them under his wing. He also ended up being the general manager of the Cleveland Indians, and unfortunately, he passed away in 1986 from cancer. But Hank Greenberg is kind of a hero of mine, and a lot of other people too, especially in the Jewish community. Still, they look up to him, and I don't see why not. He seems like a really great guy and a great ball player. So the next ball player that I'm going to tell you guys about, you probably have already figured out by now, maybe, that it is Sandy Koufax, and this is his rookie. It's a 1955 Topps, and I'll tell you a little story about how I acquired this card right here. I think I was about 17 years old when I picked this up, and it was during a straight up trade for a 1962 Topps and a 1940 play ball Mel. I was thrilled. I knew this was an expensive card, and the gentleman that I traded with said it was fine. He really wanted the two cards that I had, and I walked away with this. I later picked up the same 1940 play ball Mel a few years later from the same gentleman, and so I still have that one in my collection. And I'll tell you guys about Mel at some other point because he's an awesome ball player and he deserves his own video. What I ended up doing afterwards was trying to acquire every single Sandy Koufax card I could. And I have another one here, which I'll show you. It is this 1957 Topps, and I really like this card too. I have maybe all of Sandy Koufax's cards except for two. I wasn't a big fan of his 1962 Topps, and so I was very happy to get rid of it. And it is one thing I tell you, and I always have told you guys, this card is probably in excellent condition or very good excellent condition. There's no creasing or anything regarding this card, but it has shown a little bit of age, and I will say that purchase what you can afford, and you can always upgrade later. This is not a difficult card. I come across this card quite often. The price is kind of expensive just because it's Sandy Koufax. But in 1955, Koufax was not the player he was in 1961. And so I'm going to go through a little bit of his stats here. And I found a really interesting article too. Sandy Koufax made his debut on June 24th, 1955. He graduated from Lafayette High School in Brooklyn, and he was actually more known for being a basketball standout than he was as a pitcher. He went to the University of Cincinnati in 1954, and he tried out for the Giants, the Pirates, and the Pirates actually offered him a contract to play with them, but they actually missed out because he had already promised the Brooklyn Dodgers. So you can imagine the Pirates having Sandy Koufax. things might be different today had he actually joined the Pirates, and it might not be in a good way either. He's kind of reminiscent of Nolan Ryan's early career, actually. Very shaky. He had spouts of brilliance, is what they said. But in the end, it really came down to his mechanics, and he really kind of stood out after in 1961. The reason why he really didn't pitch a whole lot between 1955 and 1958 were two reasons. In fact, the first is that management wouldn't let him pitch, and Jackie Robinson tried to intervene with management and tell him this kid needs more pitching, he needs more time, and that Jackie Robinson believed in him quite a bit. I didn't really know that. I thought that he was just there, and Jackie Robinson, he retired in 1956. So it was very, very early in Sandy Koufax's career that Robinson and Koufax were teammates. Walter Austin really didn't pitch him much, and Koufax was very shaky, not in a Ryan Dern kind of way. I've heard from people that when Ryan Dern came out to pitch, people stopped eating their popcorn. And I think maybe that was the same case with a young Sandy Koufax, too, or even a young Nolan Ryan. Now, in the case of Nolan Ryan and Koufax, they had blazing fastballs, but very little control. And for Ryan, his time in New York was disastrous. He hated it, and he bolted for the West Coast. And Koufax also went to the West Coast as well with the Los Angeles Dodgers, and that's when he starts to pick up his mechanics and his skills, and he just becomes the pitcher that we all know and love today. Koufax also didn't start in the regular rotation until 1957 as well. And during this time from 1957 to 1960, he had a lot of injuries as well, which held him back. I want to go through some of his stats. I think you guys are familiar with them. I certainly am. And they're always fun to see. So he's a seven-time All-Star, and he has a 165-87 one-loss record between 1955 and 1966. His ERA is 2.76, and he's got 2,396 strikeouts to his name. He is a four-time World Series champion: 1955, 59, 63, and 1965. I think 1965 is probably his best. I wasn't aware that he had a 1955 World Series ring, although he did not appear in a game during that World Series. He's got a National League MVP in 1963, a World Series MVP in 63 and 65 as well. Very well deserved. And he's a three-time Cy Young Award winner: 1963, 65, and 66. He's also a three-time pitching Triple Crown winner as well in 63, 65, and 66 as well. Also, he has four no-hitters and a perfect game on September 9th, 1965. He made it into the Hall of Fame in 1972, and he was the youngest ever elected with an 86%. I was looking up similar pitchers from the 1960s to see if anybody else could really kind of hold the candle to him. And I found a few of them, which I thought were really kind of interesting. Whitey Ford, and Whitey Ford from 1960 to 66 went 113 and 52 with a 286 ERA and 1,020 strikeouts. Then you have Bob Gibson, a very scary pitcher. I would not want to face this guy ever. Thank God that I'm not Denny McClain, because that was an issue for Denny McClain too. And so he went during his lifetime in baseball. He went 251 and 174. And from 1960 to 66, he was 122 and 83 with a 3.11 ERA. And then, Warren Swan, he's pitching in the 1960s up through 1965 because that's when he retired. He wasn't really much of a factor except for 1 year, and he's more known for the 1950s than he is from the 1960s, although I think 1963 was a very good year for Lawrence Vaughn. Just to tell you right off the bat, real quickly, Lawrence Vaughn led the league in the 1950s with 20 or more wins between 1957 and 1961, and he had 13 20-win seasons as well. He's probably a guy I wouldn't want to face either. And then you have Nolan Ryan and Tom Seaver, but they weren't factors in the 1960s. Then you had Koufax's teammate Don Drysdale, and from what Johnny Logan had said to me, that John Drysdale was one of the scariest pitchers he ever faced, and just absolutely terrified. And there was a good reason, because Don Drysdale was not afraid to hit you. From 1960 to 1966, his ERA was 2.87, and he eventually, during his career, he had a 209, 166, one loss record, and 295 ERA. Juan Marcial is another guy that I kind of forgot about from the 1960s. He played from 1960 to 1975, and during that time, he had a 243, 142, one loss record with a 2.89 ERA, but from 1960 to 1966, he was 130 and 58 with a 2.66 ERA. This is from the Tallahassee Democrat, October 2nd, 1965. Big Sandy to watch opener. Sandy Koufax, Los Angeles 25 game winner, said Friday night that if the Dodgers win the National League pennant, he definitely will not pitch in the opener of the World Series against the Minnesota Twins Wednesday. Quote, I didn't want to say anything about it before because we were not in a position to clinch the pennant, unquote, the Dodgers ace left-hander told the Associated Press. But at no time did I ever consider it. I will definitely not pitch, unquote. The last previous word on the subject had been that Koufax was the last previous word on the subject had been that Koufax, who is Jewish, would consult a rabbi to determine whether he could pitch Wednesday, which is Yom Kippur, the holiest day of the year for the Jews. But Koufax dispelled that thought before Friday's game against Milwaukee, when he firmly stated that he would not pitch. Koufax is reported to have it written into his contract that he does not have to pitch on Jewish holidays. With Koufax bowing out, it was considered almost certainty that the Dodgers will start Don Drysdale, the 23-game winner. If they get into the series, that would set Koufax back into the second game on Thursday. Koufax, however, still could squeeze in the last three starts, working the seventh and final game with 2 days rest if the series goes that far. Earlier in the day, the Los Angeles Herald-Examiner had asked three rabbis if Koufax might be permitted to pitch on Yom Kippur. The paper received these responses. Rabbi Edgar F. Martin of Wilshire Boulevard Temple, quote, Sandy should not pitch. Baseball is a business. If it is Sandy Koufax's business, Yom Kippur is a day of prayer and meditation, not for work, unquote. Rabbi Samuel Fishman, director of the Heidel Council at UCLA, the only circumstances under which a Jew could work on such a day is when it's a matter of life and death. He adds, Sandy Koufax has shown so much moral integrity, character, and personal physical courage. He should not violate the principles he has so well exemplified to the world. Rabbi Max Musebaum, Temple Israel, Hollywood. He's never pitched before on a Jewish holy day, and the Jewish community certainly hopes that he does not pitch now. Yom Kippur is the one day of the year, in fact, he should not pitch because it is the Day of Atonement, the most sacred day in all of Jewish life. Dodger Club officials have not indicated who their starter might be, but undoubtedly it will be right-handed ace Don Drysdale. I think it's a very slippery slope when you compromise your integrity or your belief systems in order to please other people. It very rarely, if ever, works out in your favor, and in the end, all you're doing is cheating yourself. There's a lot that I really enjoy about the hobby, not just with meeting with new friends or old friends and trying to acquire cards for my collection or teaching you guys about some of these ball players. Uh, One of the things I think the hobby is done really well is to teach people how to do transactions and build their reputation, and that requires integrity with every transaction that you do. And reputations, they can take a lifetime to build and just seconds to destroy. In any event, guys, let me know what you think about these ball players. If you have any great stories or cards that you want to mention, I'd love to hear about them. Um, Sandy Koufax's cards are a little expensive, and same with Hank Greenberg's. But here's the thing: is that if you want something bad enough, uh, there is no reason why you can't try to achieve your goals in life. If your goal is to try to track down a Sandy Koufax rookie here, make it happen. It is not going to be overnight, but I think you can do it. I think that you can build a fantastic collection if you work hard enough for it and you maintain your integrity while doing it. So, guys, thank you very much. I greatly appreciate you stopping by and hearing what I have to say. And as always, leave a comment, a like, and subscribe. And I'll talk to you later. Musebaum, Temple Israel, Hollywood. He's never pitched before on a Jewish holiday. Well, I'm going to try this one or 30 more times.